welcome, and thank you for choosing made-up history to fall asleep to. I'm glad you're here to unwind and drift off with some gentle stories crafted just for restful nights. If you enjoy these tales, please feel free to leave a comment below, sharing your own dream combinations. What kinds of made-up histories would you love to hear next? Your ideas help shape these episodes and keep the stories flowing. Tonight, I invite you to sail into a mysterious tale of the Titanic, but not quite as you know it. In this story, sirens from the deep play a secret role, their enchanting voices weaving fate beneath the cold iceberg's shadow. Relax, breathe deeply, and let the waves of this imagined past carry you softly towards sleep. Now let's begin. It was April 10th, 1912, and in the bustling port of Southampton, the RMS Titanic towered above the docks like a white marble cathedral on water. Everything about her gleamed with the promise of human ingenuity and grandeur. 4 vast smokestacks, luxury suites, crystal chandeliers, and Turkish baths. She was a city in motion, a miracle of engineering, and above all, unsinkable. Among her 2,200 passengers, tucked modestly among the upper-class guests, was a man named Elias Dorn. He was quiet, well-dressed, and unobtrusive, the sort of man who might be mistaken for a scholar or a minor noble. But Elias carried something no one else on board did, a memory too strange to share, too dangerous to forget. He had once seen a siren. It was winter, many years before. A cargo ship transporting timber had been caught in a fierce North Atlantic storm. Elias, then a deckhand, had been thrown overboard into the merciless sea. He should have died, but as the cold swallowed him, he heard a voice, a song unlike anything human, melancholy, ancient, and hauntingly beautiful. And then, hands like flowing water had touched him, lifting him from darkness to air. When he awoke, he was alone on a rocky shore, miles from any known coast, but etched into his memory were silver eyes, pale skin like pearl, and a whisper, "You are spared, but do not return to the deep. It remembers." For years, Elias kept this secret. He returned to that forgotten coast every year, always on the same day, leaving small offerings, sea glass, music boxes, poetry. And sometimes when the fog was thick, he heard her song again. Once, only once, she appeared. She watched him from the rocks, her voice carried in the wind. "We keep balance, Elias. That is the law." When Elias received his invitation to sail on the Titanic, he hesitated. The route would pass close to the place of his old shipwreck, but the world was moving fast, and he felt foolish, fearing old legends. So he boarded. On the first evening, while passengers dined in finery and music floated through the halls, Elias stood alone on the deck, watching the sea like it might speak. That night he dreamed, not of drowning, but of singing. In his dream he stood beneath the sea, and all around him swam shadows, not monsters, but figures. One approached. Her. She was older now, or maybe he was. Her gaze held sorrow. "You tread where promises break," she said. "The sea does not forget, Elias." He awoke with a start, sweat cold on his brow. From his cabin window, the sea was still. Too still. By the 3rd day at sea, strange stories began to circulate among the crew. One engineer claimed he heard soft music echoing through the metal pipes. A steward found wet footprints in a sealed hallway. A young mother swore her baby hummed a melody she'd never sung. Elias felt it too, in the hum of the engines, in the way the ocean shimmered just past sight. He knew the sirens were near. not in anger, in warning. He tried to speak to Captain Smith. The conversation was brief. Sirens? The captain laughed. My dear man, this is 1912. We're chasing stars now, not sea tails. But that night, Elias returned to the deck. The moon hung heavy above the sea, and mist curled like breath from sleeping giants. And then she came, not in a dream, not a memory. She rose from the water. She did not sing. She did not smile, but she stared at him, eyes glinting with grief. You returned, she said. Her voice rippled across the waves. The pact is broken. Balance must be paid. Then take me, Silius whispered. Spare the rest. She blinked slowly. The sea is not mine to command alone. We are many. Some forgive. Others remember. But your choice, it matters. The next day, Elias wandered the ship. He listened to her groans, to the metal's unease. In the boiler room, men worked in sweltering heat, but some paused to whisper of chills on their necks, of strange echoes. He left gifts. A pearl he once found, tucked behind a pipe, a songbook placed in a storage closet. He sang quietly to the waves, hoping she would hear. That evening she returned. This time, she climbed partway onto the hull as it skimmed the waves, her form cloaked in seaweed and foam. The others stir, she said. They do not want blood, but the ship has challenged the sea. It claims dominion where it should ask passage. What must I do? Elias asked. Return. Come to the water before the moon wanes. Prove you remember. He nodded. He knew the time had come. At 11:30 p.m. on April 14th, the sea held its breath. The iceberg was adrift, yes, but its course had shifted subtly over days. Pulled? Guided? The ocean moved like a hand beneath a veil. The sirens sang, not to destroy, but to restore. Elias stood on deck, dressed in his old seaman's coat. He watched the horizon, and then the berg appeared. Silent, immense. The lookouts shouted, the engines roared in reverse. But it was too late. Steel kissed ice. Rivets burst. Water poured in like fury reborn. And amidst the chaos, Elias climbed the railing. He looked to the sea. She was there. Now? He asked. Now! She said. He leapt. He did not flail. He did not scream. The cold was a welcome weight. She caught him in silence. You are the gift, she said. They will live, not all, but enough. Around them, other figures swam, sirens of many forms. Some beautiful, others terrible. They whispered songs into the water, changing currents, guiding lifeboats, nudging floating debris towards survivors. One placed a hand on the shoulder of a young steward, trapped in a hallway, guiding him to a ladder. Another tilted a lifeboat, just enough to avoid capsizing. The balance was not vengeance, it was precision. Elias floated with her as the ship broke, as lights flickered out. She kissed his forehead. Now, you are part of us. Elias Dawn's name was not among the headlines. He was never recovered, but those who lived spoke of oddities, a soft lullaby heard just before rescue, a woman in silver who swam beside their boat, the feeling that the sea somehow had chosen who stayed. And far below, where light never reaches, a new voice joined the sirens, deep, human, and tender. Each year on the night of April 14th, some sailors say the water hums. Not ominous, but sad. A morning song, a memory. They say if you listen closely, you'll hear Elias Dawn and the one who once saved him, now singing together, keeping the balance of a sea that remembers everything. Now let's drift gently into a new story, one whispered about in the quiet corners of ancient Rome, of a man who wasn't noble by birth, but who dared to plan a feast not for senators or kings, but for the gods themselves. Close your eyes, slow your breathing, and imagine a city of marble and fire, because this is the tale of the Roman who hosted a feast for the gods. The year was 64 AD, and Rome was alive with contradictions. The city shimmered under the relentless sun, its marble columns glowing softly in the afternoon light, while smoke from distant fires curled into the sky like dark fingers reaching for the heavens. This was a Rome of opulence and hardship, of grand forums bustling with merchants and senators, and narrow alleys shadowed by the weight of forgotten struggles. The air smelled faintly of roasting meat, fresh bread, and the sharp tang of the Tiber River, all mingling into a scent uniquely Roman. Amid this sprawling cityscape lived Marcus Valen, a man whose name was whispered in the corridors of power, not because of his birth, but because of his extraordinary talent. Marcus was a banquet planner unlike any other. His hands were often stained with ink from lists and invitations, his mind always preoccupied with the delicate art of arranging not just food and drink, but moments that could bend the moods of emperors, soothe the tempers of senators, and forge alliances in the shadows. Marcus was born the son of a modest curtain maker. His early life was simple, marked by the rhythmic swish of fabric and the scent of dyed linens. Yet even as a boy, Marcus had an uncanny ability to observe the world, to notice the smallest details that others overlooked, the way a flickering candlelight could soften a stern gaze, or how the clink of a wine cup could signal a change in conversation. These observations would become the foundation of his career. He began humbly, selling napkins and table linens to the wealthy, but his talent quickly became apparent when he started offering suggestions on the arrangement of guests and the timing of courses. Word spread, and soon he was sought after by some of Rome's most influential families. Despite his rising reputation, Marcus never forgot his roots. His style was never ostentatious, rather it was subtle and deeply thoughtful, weaving together sensory details to create atmospheres that lingered long after the last morsel was eaten. One evening, as dusk settled over Rome and the city's lamps flickered to life, Marcus sat at his writing table in a modest chamber above a bustling tavern. He was meticulously planning a banquet for a minor magistrate, a man of little note, but eager to impress. Floral arrangements were his focus that night. Delicate white lilies and deep red roses to be arranged with precision. The scent would hint at purity and passion, a delicate balance that Marcus had mastered over the years. His hand trembled slightly with exhaustion as he dipped his quill into the ink. The warm glow of a nearby candle illuminated his parchment, casting dancing shadows on the wall. Outside, the distant murmur of the city continued. Horses' hooves on cobblestones, merchants shouting their wares, the occasional song from a passing bard. As Marcus worked, his eyelids grew heavy. The steady scratch of the quill slowed, and soon his head tilted forward, resting against the table. The candle nearby flickered, and wax began to drip slowly, peeling over a list of poultry suppliers that Marcus had just written. In the quiet of his sleep, Marcus found himself standing in a place that felt both familiar and otherworldly. The wooden banquet table stretched before him, but it seemed endless, carved from dark oak that gleamed under an unseen light. At the far end stood a figure clad in shimmering silver robes, that rippled like liquid mercury. His eyes sparkled like polished opals, and a pair of delicate wings curled from his sandals. "You are summoned," the figure said, his voice a gentle breeze, rustling through pine trees. "The gods wish to dine." Marcus blinked, uncertain. "The gods?" The figure stepped closer, raising a goblet filled with stars. "A feast. Here in Rome. You have 7 days." He tossed a coin at Marcus's feet, a coin of pure gold, etched with a winged sandal on one side and Latin words on the other. "Cibum pro aeternis," food for the eternal. As the coin hit the floor, the candle beside Marcus flared, casting wild shadows. Marcus gasped awake. The golden coin lay where it had fallen, glowing faintly in the dim room. For 2 days, Marcus tried to dismiss the vision as a dream, a trick of exhaustion. Yet strange things began to happen. His herbs, once slow to grow, flourished overnight, bursting with vibrant green leaves and delicate flowers. Fishmongers brought him eels that shimmered with iridescent scales, like tiny rainbows undulating beneath the water surface. A local farmer delivered eggs from hens that, Marcus swore, sang faint melodies at dawn. Most peculiar of all was a taste lingering in his mouth, the memory of starlight, crisp and cool, as if he had indeed sipped from the goblet of the gods. Rumors of divine intervention were not unheard of in Rome. Temples pulsed with an unseen energy at dusk. Statues sometimes seemed warm to the touch, as if imbued with life. Priests occasionally emerged from their chambers shaken, their voices silent, eyes wide with visions. Marcus knew then that the gods were not merely stories to be told. They were present. They were watching. Determined, Marcus chose the ruins of an old forum as the site for the feast. The place had been abandoned after a tragic accident, the fall of a marble statue that had crushed 3 senators during a heated debate over taxes. The area was deemed cursed by many, but Marcus believed the gods preferred drama. Invitations, as one might expect, were not delivered by messenger. Instead, Marcus enlisted the help of a flute player named Della, who claimed to have once played music so haunting it brought a nymph to tears. For 3 nights, she wandered the 7 hills of Rome, playing a melody that rose and fell with the breeze, weaving through the city's labyrinthine streets. Birds followed her haunting tune, and dreams carried her notes to the ears of those unseen. The menu Marcus envisioned was unlike any other. It would honor the realms of gods and mortals alike. Appetizers made from mist figs soaked in dew, gathered from sacred groves. Honeyed boar raised on poetry, read aloud at sunrise. Olives harvested from trees grown in soil touched by ancient spells, and a cake that whispered forgotten memories with every bite. But Marcus soon realized that the food was only part of the challenge. The true test was the arrangement of the guests. He spent nights sketching seating charts in chalk, only to wake each morning to find them erased by some invisible hand. He understood then that this was no ordinary gathering. It was a delicate balance of power, egos, and ancient grudges. He placed Juno and Jupiter at opposite ends of the long table, recalling their recent quarrel over a mortal's prayer. Mars was seated near the hearth, where he could feel the warmth of the fire. Venus required moonlight, but protection from the wind to keep her hair untouched. Mercury, ever the wanderer, would not have a seat, but would drift among the guests. The stage was set. The city awaited. The night of the feast arrived, with a sky thick with stars and a crescent moon hanging low like a silver cradle. The ruins of the old forum were transformed. Lanterns hung from ancient pillars, casting a golden glow over the cracked marble floors. Silk banners fluttered silently in the cool breeze, embroidered with symbols invoking peace and prosperity. The air was fragrant with the scent of jasmine and burning myrrh, mingling with the promise of something beyond the mortal realm. Marcus moved swiftly among the preparations, adjusting cushions, tasting sauces, and nodding quietly as each element fell into place. Despite his confidence, a quiet tension hummed beneath the surface. The coin from Mercury still lay heavy in his pocket, a reminder of the god's summons and the uncertain consequences. As the first guests arrived, the forum filled with murmurs and glances, mortals and gods alike, summoned from far and wide. They came wrapped in shimmering cloaks, their eyes bright with anticipation. Jupiter, majestic and stern, strode through the crowd with the authority of a storm, his thunderbolt never far from reach. Beside him, Juno's eyes burned with a mix of pride and suspicion, her robes trailing softly behind her. Mars' armor clinked quietly as he surveyed the room, and Venus moved with a graceful, almost hypnotic sway. But it was not the gods alone who commanded attention. The mortals at the feast were figures of legend, poets whose verses could stir the heavens, warriors who had tasted death and returned, and mystics who whispered secrets to the stars. All were drawn together by the invisible thread Marcus had woven with his invitations and melodies. The feast began with a toast raised by Mercury, his voice lilting like a songbird's. "To the mingling of worlds," he declared, and the guests raised their goblets filled with nectar that sparkled like liquid light. Food was served with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Plates of roasted pheasant glazed with honey and pomegranate seeds. Bowls of lentils simmered in fragrant herbs. Freshly baked bread, warm and crusty, passed hand to hand. Each bite seemed to pulse with magic, awakening senses and memories long forgotten. As the night deepened, the barriers between gods and mortals began to blur. Laughter echoed among statues and shadows. Stories were shared, some true, some embroidered with divine exaggeration. Marcus, seated quietly at the head of the table, watched the mingle. Marcus, seated quietly at the head of the table, watched the mingling with a mixture of pride and unease. It was then that he noticed her, an unfamiliar figure, standing by the shattered column where the senators had fallen so long ago. She was strikingly beautiful, with hair the color of the sea at dawn, and eyes deep as the ocean's abyss. Her skin shimmered with a faint iridescence, as if kissed by moonlight and salt. Marcus felt a strange pull, a sudden warmth spreading through his chest. The woman approached him slowly, her voice soft but clear. "I am Ceres," she said, "a siren of the waters. I heard your melody and came to see the feast." Marcus blinked, unsure whether he had imagined the moment. Sirens were the stuff of sailors' tales, dangerous creatures who lured men to their doom with their songs. But here she was, real and present, her gaze steady and unyielding. "Why have you come?" Marcus asked, curiosity overcoming caution. "To witness," Ceres replied, "and to offer a bargain." Before Marcus could respond, a chill swept through the forum. The fire flickered, shadows lengthened, and the murmurs of the guests hushed. From the water basin at the edge of the ruins, a ripple grew into a wave, and another figure emerged, taller, more formidable, crowned with coral and seaweed. This was Lycor, lord of the Sirens, who had ruled the coastal depth for centuries. Marcus fell in. Lyca's voice was like the crashing surf. You have invited gods and mortals alike, but you have forgotten the balance. The sea demands its tribute. Marcus swallowed hard. The stakes had risen beyond anything he could have imagined. The feast was no longer a simple gathering. It was a trial, one that could bind Rome's fate to the mysterious depths, or break it forever. As the night wore on, Marcus faced impossible choices: to honor the gods, to placate the Sirens, and to keep his own humanity intact would require every ounce of wit, courage, and heart he possessed. The feast was only just beginning. The weight of Lyca's words settled over Marcus, like the heavy fog that rolled in from the sea at dawn. The Lord of the Sirens regarded him with eyes as deep and cold as the ocean trenches, and Marcus felt the very ground beneath him pulse with ancient power. You summon the gods, yet ignore the sea, Lyca intoned. The realms are bound, and balance must be kept. Marcus glanced towards Ceres, who stood silently at his side, her expression unreadable. The others at the feast, both divine and mortal, watched in tense silence. I did not mean to slight the sea, Marcus said carefully, but this feast honors all, the heavens, the earth, and all between. Lyca's gaze bore into him, the ocean's roar seeming to echo in his voice. Then prove it. The Siren Lord gestured toward the shore. A challenge. If you can bridge the worlds, land and sea, with honor, then the feast may continue in peace. Fail, and Rome will suffer the wrath of the depths. Marcus's heart hammered. To refuse was unthinkable. To accept was to step into the unknown. Ceres stepped forward, her voice low and compelling. I will guide you. Under her guidance, Marcus found himself at the water's edge, the moonlight painting the waves silver. Ceres began to sing, a haunting melody that rose and fell like the tide itself. The song spoke of forgotten promises and ancient bonds, of respect between the realms and the sacrifices required. As the notes filled the air, Marcus understood that this was more than a song. It was a pact, woven with magic and memory. You must craft an offering worthy of both gods and sirens, Ceres explained. A feast that honors the land and sea, the mortal and divine. Back in the forum, Marcus set to work. The hours passed in a blur of preparation. Dishes were crafted with ingredients plucked from the earth and sea. Salt-cured fish kissed with wild herbs. Wild mushrooms gathered from sacred groves. Seaweed seasoned with rare spices. And fruits bathed in ocean mist. Every dish was more than food. It was a story, a prayer, a bridge. The guests gathered once more, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames and the tension of anticipation. Lyca and Ceres approached the table, their presence commanding the air. As the first course was served, the silence was broken by a voice. A mortal poet, his words weaving magic into the feast. He spoke of the ocean's depth and the sky's height, of the delicate dance between worlds. With every bite, the guests felt the fragile balance shift. An invisible thread tugged between land and sea. Suddenly the ground trembled. A chorus of voices rose, some fearful, some awed. A wave crashed against the shore, a thunderous applause from the depths. Lyca smiled, the storm in his eyes calming. The pact is sealed, he declared. Rome's fate is intertwined with the sea. For better or worse,